Welcome, friends. This is another video in the series of videos that have been made for the SQAA framework, the School Quality Assessment and Assurance. In this video, particularly, we are taking up different domains. Today, we'll be talking about domain 4, which is inclusivity in schools. And for this particularly, I have invited Principal Manju Balasubramanyam, Principal of DPS Bangalore North, who has had an experience of 25 years as an academician and has been associated with the field of education. An MSc in zoology, an MEd. She is a die-hard optimist and a person with a golden heart. Ma'am, the die-hard thing, I think we are two of us. You are a die-hard optimist, same I can say for myself, but person with a golden heart, hands down, ma'am, the credit goes to you.
Thank you.
She's got a very strong background in science and education, very strong in both verbal and written communication skills, and is updated with the latest development in education. She shares a great rapport with her peers, parents, and her students, a smiling personality, a pillar of strength for all of us. She's had a number of CBSE nominations to her credit. She's the city coordinator for evaluation, assessment, and examinations. She was the mentor for CCE. She is a member of the school inspections for affiliations for all categories. She is a resource person for CBSE for different topics, particularly about adolescent education programs. She does a lot of community work, and she's a member of the Spastic Society of Karnataka, member of the Cancer Aid Society, member of the National Association for the Blind, of the Rotary Club, Gunj, Sahas, the NIOS, the Ability Foundation, and Parikrama. A widely traveled educationist, she's been to different states of the US and also UK, Thailand, and Nepal. She was the cultural ambassador to Singapore and has interests as diverse as technology, a voracious reader, a traveler, a researcher, a yoga practitioner, and loves to listen to music. A much decorated principal of our fraternity, she is a recipient of CBSE National Mentor Award, a national award by MHRD. She is also a recipient of National Award for Teachers, again conferred on her by MHRD. She is a recipient of FICCI's Arise National Award for exceptional work on inclusivity. She has a certificate of honor by CBSE, a special award by Sri Sri Award for overall excellence in education, again a national award. She's been a recipient of the Progressive Principal Award, the Global Innovation School Award by BITS Pilani, Dubai, Parikrama Address School Awards for Best Health Practices in Bangalore, Fulbright Award in Teaching by the US Department of Education, the ISA School Award by British Council twice in a row, Exemplary Leadership Award by Expressions India, an Educationist of the Year by Silver Zone Foundation, and the series goes on. Ma'am, I'm getting breathless reading your CV. Welcome to the show, and I'm sure what all inputs you are going to give on inclusivity are really going to enlighten us. I would give you full credit for raising the bar for us when we were partners with you in the pilot study for SQAA. Because the way that you explained it and what you are doing in your school, you have more than 400 children who fall in this category. Yes. I say it is amazing work that you are doing, and there'll be a lot to learn from you. We'll be sharing this video on digital media so that other leaders, teachers, educationists can understand the SQAA manual better. And now that they are preparing for the self-assessment form, which is to be filled up for affiliations, they have better clarity before they go to read the manual as such. So I will not be interfering much. I would like you to explain what exactly SQAA says in domain 4. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vinodita ma'am. SQAA 4 it's placed centrally in the score. There are 7 domains, and this is at number 4. And when I see this at number 4, I feel it's at the heart of score. It connects to all the other 6 domains. It's like the hub. It pulls everything, goes from inclusion, from equity, from quality education to the others. And this is also central to the theme of the NEP 2020, because it talks about inclusive and equitable education for all learners. When it says all learners, it means all learners, that is children, teachers, management, beneficiaries, the community around. And I think that is the foundation for a society of tomorrow that includes everybody and treats and gives opportunities that are not equal but are equitable. So the necessary scaffolding and support that everyone needs to excel is there. The second central point of inclusive education and the NEP is removal of barriers. If there is any barrier to learning, inclusive education aims at removing that barrier. It, Either it's a barrier towards learning, that is a specific learning disability, or there is an infrastructure access barrier. So you provide ramps and lifts, which is now mandatory for CBSE affiliation. Earlier, it was very easy that you could have a ramp at the ground floor and say that, yes, I have a ramp and the child is accommodated on the ground floor. Now, CBSE is very clear. You need to have, if you have a 5-story building, every floor needs to have that. It doesn't stop there. It says it should have toilets that are accessible for children with special needs. So you need a washroom that is compliant to the movement of a wheelchair. It has railings for people to hold. And look at the beauty of it. It is not only for children. It is for children, it is for parents, it is for teachers, it is for grandparents, elderly who visit the school. And so you're making something that is universal design. You're not making it for one person, but you're making it for the community. And so everybody begins to use it. The third that CPSE is talking about, and which will come in very soon, is accessible drinking water, which water and washrooms are 2 priorities of schooling. Infrastructure. Now, we never ever think that we need wash basins that are accessible. So for a child on a wheelchair, the regular wash basin is not accessible. And here you're talking about that. Inclusive education, inclusive practices in domain 4 doesn't restrict itself only to infrastructure. It talks about inclusive education in curriculum, assessment, and pedagogy. Pedagogy, assessment, curriculum, everything. It talks about inclusive practices in sports and co-curricular activities. It talks about a change in the mindset of people. And last but not the least, the new document also talks about the girl child. The NEP 2020 widened the perspective of inclusive education. From only children with special needs, it went on to bring in SEDGs, socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So I think this is what the domain talks about. And, your further questions, I could elaborate if there are any.
Ma'am, in the beginning, what I would want you to do is the first line that you spoke, it talks about equity and equality.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Absolutely. There's this very beautiful picture that I always share, Vinodita ma'am, and I think most people in schools would have seen those 4 pictures of 3 children standing across a wall and watching a football match. Now, equality is providing the same opportunities to all children. So I have a good math textbook, and it's illustrated, and I give it to all children, and all children learn. But you and I know that all children do not learn.
Do not.
While the gifted and talented might get bored with this book and will want a higher level of textbook, there might be a child who's struggling with math because of learning gaps in mathematics and might need a simpler version or a toned down version of the book. So when you do that, when you bring workbooks or support material or resources or assistive technology, that takes care of individualized learning, personalized learning, then the process moves from equality to equity.
Yes.
And you're providing those scaffolding measures that that particular child needs so that they all reach the same level.
Exactly.
And the best part of inclusive education is when they reach that level, the barriers are gone. There are no barriers to learning.
Exactly. Like I would say it is yatha yog.
Absolutely.
Give what the child needs so that they all come up to the same level. Like in my workshops, I often say that you have a 10th standard child, you have a 4th standard child, you have a nursery child, and you have 10 suites. Give 2 to the nursery child, 4 to the 4th standard child, and the rest of it to the 10th standard child, because the body mass index is different and their needs will be different.
Absolutely.
So it is how we explain equity and equality, right?
Absolutely.
On the onset, people do not understand that inclusivity or inclusive practices in schools. I want you to take it up that it is not just catering to the children with special needs, with some physical needs or some mental needs or learning disabilities. What all does it include?
Ma'am, one of the clear demarcations and what is visible, generally you address needs that are visible to the eye. So when children have physical impairment, visual impairment, hearing impairment, to some level, an intellectual disability, these can easily be spotted. And therefore, the remediation or the support that you can provide also comes in easily. But 1 in 7 children has specific learning disabilities, which are also known as invisible disabilities. The SLDs, so these children look apparently normal. They are vibrant, they're full of energy, they speak well, but academics is a huge pressure. Earlier, these children were classified as lazy or not hardworking, and they would get labeled. But today, with better understanding of psychology and pedagogy, we know that there are SLDs like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and there are measures. And while there are measures for them to learn basics of subjects, and very often when I speak to principals on inspections, I said, you have a special educator, you have a counselor, and their first reply is, हमारे यहाँ ऐसे बच्चे नहीं हैं, ma'am. And statistically, in every group, in every population, whether it's rural or urban, whether it is, a government or a private school, you will have children. So the gap lies in the absence of identification. And there is where you need to empower the classroom teacher to do the first levels of identification using a checklist, and then pass on that information, gather the same information from the parent, and then pass it on to a special educator who can do a report. We generally don't do anything before grade 5. We allow for all the measures to support the child. So that is one set of things that are not noticed. The girl child, in a very subtle manner, gender biases exist, and they often take over, probably not in urban schools, but in many parts of India and in schools and homes. That divide exists, and I think inclusion looks at it in a big way. CBSE looks at it in a big way. And for the first time, CBSE and the NEP are talking about the gifted and talented, because they also are in a way isolated, because they don't fit with everybody else. So these hubs, creation of hubs where the gifted and talented from many schools can come together, do summer workshops is something. Geographically isolated children in schools are being brought in through the use of technology. And I think technology is a great leveler. It's a remover of barrier. And I think the pandemic taught us that. And there is this NCRT website resource. It talks about all the e-resources that are available for children with special needs. And there is now an app called Prashast that can be used for early identification of SLD and ASD.
Ma'am,
CBSE has the sign language program in the Bhasha Sangam. So
Okay.
schools can use sign language to teach chapters. So even if you
Okay.
don't have a sign language expert, you have that. So it takes care of a lot of stuff that all children can benefit from. While for some child it might be a necessity, for others it's another alternate way of learning.
One thing I would like to add here for the benefit of all is that I have heard that if we identify these children with special needs or maybe the slow learners, like you mentioned, that all of these come into inclusivity. So, is it some age or is it some platform where we can identify these, or we as school leaders can make sure that the timely intervention is done? Any areas where we should be more cautious about?
CBSE, which has the milestones that children need to achieve.
Okay.
Right now, these milestones are from birth, and
Okay.
these should be available not only with parents but with school teachers as well.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if there are gaps in learning, age 3, 4, 5, 6 is too early to label a child, because those gaps in learning could be due to multiple reasons. It could be the home environment, it could be the birth of another child, it could be the pandemic,
It could be anything.
right? It just could be anything. So it's just too early to say. But some are very, very visible. For example, a child with Down syndrome, very visible. A child on the autism spectrum is very visible. With ADHD and ADD, the more I talk to people and psychiatrists, they say we need to tread carefully, because there
Yes.
could be many, many reasons in today's world.
The
For
child could be plain, simple, naughty.
exactly,
Huh.
exactly. So I think what we need is caution, but we need empowerment to say that these are flags, red flags, and note it down and go to the next expert.
Right,
Yes,
because it's a huge challenge for the schools also.
right.
Supposing they are able to identify some such children, the parents are not ready to accept that. And most schools do not have special educators. We are finding such challenges more so after COVID because of the excessive screen time that the children had to go through. Some was a compulsion, the other was that the parents became more liberal with sharing of phones with the children, and they were watching just about anything without a check. So these things have cropped in at a very alarming pace. So
Absolutely.
now the schools are really finding it very challenging to put the children back on track and to identify these issues. Things are falling back in place. Coming back to the score domain that we have, it is on inclusive practices, and the domain has five subdomains standards. So the subdomains that we have here are barrier-free environment. You just spoke about it, that now the latest CBSE circular, I think just a fortnight back or a month back, we had that circular by CBSE where they have given clear guidelines about these ramps and toilets being friendly for the children with special needs. I would like your input on games, sports, and other recreational facilities for which the schools need to work. This is subdomain 4.2.
This is an area that does need a lot of attention. While there are schools that belong to the army public schools have a lot of support coming for students who participate in the Paralympics. All other schools will need to look at sports and inclusive sports where children can not just be in the cheering crowd, but also play a participatory game. One of the important areas is indoor sport. So, supporting and encouraging indoor sports is a way that is being spoken about. One is looking at playing football, blind football.
Okay.
So,
And how is it done?
so that is done. It is through cues of sound. So when
Okay.
you play blind football, everybody is blindfolded,
Okay.
and so you don't see the ball. The able-bodied and the disabled and the child with the visual impairment, and you need to play this game in pin drop silence. You cannot have shouting and screaming, because these cues tell the children that the ball is here or there.
Okay.
So, but
Okay.
everybody plays together.
Okay.
right? And we have blind cricket, blind football. A lot of games are
Okay.
coming up this way, and the best way of learning to do this is to work with children in communities who are special needs.
Okay.
So work with the blind school, bring
In
the blind.
most schools, yeah, most
Yeah,
schools, I think they do send their children to visit orphanages and blind Vidyalayas and all that, to bring a little amount of sensitivity in the able-bodied children. But then again, we need to move a step ahead and involve them more, so that that inclusivity comes and these children are sensitized to the needs of the others also.
absolutely. Swimming is a great leveler again,
Okay.
because it lays less pressure on your body limbs for everybody. So whether it's an obese child or a child with low limb disability, for everybody, and all children like water. So encouraging swimming is another way of bringing all kids together.
Okay. Okay. And then we have subdomain 4.3, that is transportation facility. So,
Yes.
and for schools who have their own transportations, what would be your input for them?
So I have been doing this, thinking about this for my own school, but I hope this year I am at least, we are able to have one bus, probably a mini bus that has a ramp that lowers down,
Okay.
because most children with physical disability are brought into school by their parents, and
Uh-huh.
they have modified cars or modified vans. So if we can have one bus where that ramp kind of a facility is there, and inside you have an area for a wheelchair that can get locked in once the child comes in. The rest of the seats can be regular, so the other children can also travel with this child. The whole making transportation friendly, accessible, is the child doesn't travel in isolation. So at least at a start, probably in the future we will have every bus with one seat that is there.
Yes.
But at least
Yes.
one to start with, we can have a bus with a ramp and a wheelchair space.
Okay, so we are left with two subdomains. One is overall attitudinal barriers, and the other is self special in equity projects. So we spoke about equity a little. That will pertain to the projects of study or of co-curricular celebrations or areas which we have in school. That, I think, to some extent we have understood. I would be more interested in having your inputs on the attitudinal barriers, because you being, I think, one of the few schools in India who have these children in such huge numbers. So how do you manage that, and what does the SQAA domain say about it?
I think the attitudinal barriers, the barriers in our mind, are the most difficult to overcome. Because coming from a country like India, where disability, not only in India, but the world over, disability is a taboo. And, parents feel very uncomfortable talking about their child with special needs. And because society in India, culturally, there is always this कि पिछले जन्म में कुछ गड़बड़ की थी, इसीलिए इस जन्म में बच्चा ऐसे पैदा हुआ.
Yes.
And that is a huge guilt that parents take, and that uske liye they suffer and they get the child to go through the pain.
Yes.
Now that change is ki, you are not responsible for the child being born this way. And we need to, say, what can this child do? Because this child has some potential and capability. So I think that mindset change of, going scientific and saying, this is the problem, these are the available solutions, what can we do? So that can only come through constant conversation. Earlier in your conversation, you had mentioned about parents' denial. It is a very difficult thing to accept for neurotypically normal parents that their child is different.
Different, yes.
And the cycle of denial or the time of denial varies from person to person. I've seen the most educated parents who are doctors.
They find it very hard.
Very hard. But the only thing is you keep at it. For getting the parent stakeholder into confidence and working as a team is the only thing. And so you need to keep at it all the time.
And Manju ma'am, I would also want you to enlighten the people watching this video regarding the performance indicators and the levels that we have, because some people might view this video in isolation, not in the sequence. So I would want that the video should be complete in itself, and we tell them briefly about the performance indicators given in the SQAA manual, so that the people are able to fill up the self-assessment form.
Sure. So in SQAA, all the domains and subdomains have 4 levels. So inception, stable, transient, and then the ones that are dynamic. And dynamic doesn't mean you've reached the pinnacle. You are on the journey and you're learning. You are a reflective school, and you are constantly improving your standards for your own self. And I think SQAA, that's why, is a self-assessment program. It tells you to look into your practices and say where you are. So it starts with infrastructural requirements. So that is your first nascent step to say, yes, I am there. And not only do you have it, you also have records and maintenance of inventory that you have. Now that is level 1 for infrastructure, okay, for physical environment. On the other side, at number 4, it will start that the school has a policy. The school is so evolved that they have a policy. The school policy speaks about inclusion, equity, and justice, and education that is just and quality. So it is a continuous professional development that talks about diversity and inclusion. Teachers undergo that training. Teachers undergo training on special educational needs and LD. So that is there. There are events that talk about raising awareness not only in the school but in the community. So those are levels where your curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment shows that. So, and there is a feedback and feed forward. So a feedback is taken from children with special needs, and the system around them is developed so that they learn the way they would learn. So this would be the level of a school that has reached a dynamic stage.
Okay.
So it varies. That's the movement. And schools can use these performance indicators and say, this is where I am, and this is what I have. I am desirous of going from here to there.
Because it is a dynamic thing, it is self-explanatory, it is contextual, it is me to my own zone. So yes, I feel it's a beautiful document, provided we all understand it and do it in the spirit of SQAA.
Absolutely.
That
and the
is
spirit
very,
of SQAA is self-improvement.
That is self-improvement.
I'm not in competition with anybody but myself. The NEP and SQAA are talking about transparency, and that sometimes is a little difficult for private managements. So it's I think it is with time, and when they also see it as non-threatening, because again the essence of SQAA is non-threatening.
It's non-threatening.
So it's a mindset fear, and when they their principals talk to them and they say this is not something that is going to be punitive in measures, but a self-improvement program, I'm sure they will, because currently they see it like accreditation, cancellation of an affiliation.
Exactly. That was
ranking of schools.
That was the part I particularly liked about this manual, that it is school quality assessment and assurance. It is not something like school quality assessment and accreditation.
Absolutely.
So that threat should not be there.
Right.
I suppose gradually, when this wave is going to spread out, people will adopt it more happily, and they will go with it. Because as of now, as you say, the private managements, they might be having their own apprehensions about the transparency that is being there. But then, kuch to honge unki majburiyan, यूं ही तो कोई बेवफा नहीं होता. So let's see all of them coming on board. Yes. It was wonderful having you here, Manju ma'am. Thank you so much for being here, and it was wonderful having you here on the show.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
God bless you. Bye-bye.